Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the stack of sources you've shared with us and cut straight through the noise to get to the most compelling, actionable insights. Today, we are tackling just a massive question. Why do we do what we do? We're going to look at the biology that sits underneath, well, everything. Our best moments and our absolute worst.
Right, and our mission today has to be synthesis, which means we need to break a habit that I think we all have, which is reductionism. You know, when we see a behavior, maybe something terrible or something amazing, we tend to reach for one simple answer.
We want that single cause. It was their genes or their childhood or the culture.
Exactly, and they're convenient shortcuts, but they're just not enough. The real intellectual goal here is to see that a behavior is never caused by just one thing. The moment you point to a hormone or a gene, you're automatically pulling in everything else. It's all one big arc.
So we're going to trace that arc. We're sort of walking backward in time from the immediate moment to, well, to the deep past. Where do we start?
We start at the most immediate level. The split second before a behavior happens, that's the world of neurobiology. Then we'll zoom out. Hours and days before, that's hormones. Then years, childhood, adolescence. And finally, the really deep stuff, evolution, culture.
Okay, let's start there then. Inside the brain, 1 second before, you look at its architecture, and it's not one single thing, is it? It's layered.
It's layered, yeah, and those layers tell an evolutionary story. You can think of it in 3 parts. Layer 1 is the ancient core, the brainstem. This is the part you'd find in a gecko. It's totally automatic. Regulatory stuff, shivering when you're cold, initiating a stress response.
Pure survival mechanics, no thought involved.
None at all. Then you have layer 2, the limbic system. This is a bit more recent, a mammalian invention, and it's all about emotion. But here's the key thing. Layer 2 talks to layer 1. So if you're feeling, unloved or lonely, that emotion can actually trigger a layer 1 survival drive, like craving comfort food.
So an abstract feeling hijacks a basic drive, which brings us to layer 3, the part that makes us, well, human.
The neocortex, and specifically the frontal cortex, which is just massively expanded in primates like us. This is where you get cognition, abstraction, philosophy. And it can work the other way. You can be sitting perfectly still, just thinking about a sad fact, and layer 3 can make layer 1 trigger a full-blown stress response, the same one you get running from a lion.
That is a wild idea.
Yeah.
That a thought alone can create such a physical, ancient reaction. Okay, so within that structure, there's one part that always gets the spotlight for immediate reactions. The amygdala. The fear center.
It is the fear center, that's true. But what's so crucial to understand is that the very same region is also central to generating aggression. The part of your brain that makes you afraid is, very often, the same part that tells you to attack.
Which makes a certain brutal sense, doesn't it? Attack is the ultimate defense. So if the amygdala is the gut reaction alarm bell, what's the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, doing in that split second?
The PFC is the CEO. It's the brain's executive. Its job is to organize knowledge, start complex actions, manage working memory, and, most importantly, regulate emotion. It's the part that does abstract thinking. Figuring out that apples and peaches are conceptually closer than, say, apples and toilet plungers.
And on a social level, the PFC is basically willpower, right?
Precisely. It's what allows you to postpone gratification. It's what helps you do the harder thing. It's the brake that stops you from screaming at a coworker who's driving you crazy.
And there's a perfect, if tragic, historical case that shows what happens when you lose that brake system.
Phineas Gage, the railroad foreman in 1848. An explosion sent an iron rod straight through his head. It destroyed a huge chunk of his left frontal cortex. He survived, but he wasn't the same person.
He was no longer Gage, as they said.
Yeah. The doctor who followed him said the balance between his intellect and his animal propensities was gone. He lost all impulse control. He became profane, irreverent, couldn't plan for the future. He was, in essence, a man without a PFC. The CEO was gone.
A chilling example. Okay, let's widen the lens. We've talked about the immediate brake system. What about the fuel in the tank, the hormones? Now we're moving out to hours and days before an act.
And this is a really important distinction. Neurotransmitters are, local. They act in milliseconds across a synapse. Hormones travel through the bloodstream. They can affect trillions of cells over hours or days. They change the rules of the game for the whole system.
And when you say hormones and aggression, everyone's mind immediately jumps to one thing: testosterone.
It does, and there is a link, for sure. You can see it in castration and replacement experiments. But, and this is huge, but the brain mostly ignores testosterone fluctuations within a person's normal range.
So just because I'm having a high T day doesn't mean I'm suddenly going to get into a fight.
No, not at all. The risk of aggression really only climbs when you get to what we call superphysiological levels. Think anabolic steroid abuse. Way beyond what the body can make naturally. For most people, testosterone doesn't cause aggression. It sort of amplifies the emotional state that's already there. It's an accelerator, not a steering wheel.
Yeah. What about the so-called cuddle hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin? We think of them as being about bonding and affection.
And they are. They're critical for social affiliation, for that mother-infant bond, for pair bonding. But they are completely context-dependent. They promote in-group bonding. The dark side of that is that they are also central to maternal aggression. A female rat, full of these hormones while lactating, is incredibly aggressive in defending her pups.
So they don't make you love everyone. They make you fiercely protect us from them. That's a great transition to stress. When does stress stop being a motivator and start being, well, toxic?
We talk about an inverted U shape. A little bit of short-term stress, what we might call stimulation, is actually good for you. It focuses the mind.
Right. But that chronic, day in, day out, grinding stress.
That's where it gets really damaging. Sustained stress dials down the function of the PFC, the CEO gets muffled, and it ramps up the amygdala. We become much more reactive. Under chronic stress, people's risk calculations get skewed. They start making riskier bets, going for bigger gains instead of protecting against losses. Their rational brain is literally being impaired.
And the really terrible irony here is that stress can actually make you more aggressive.
It's a feedback loop. Acting aggressively can be a very effective stress reducer, physiologically. If you shock a rat, it's very likely to turn and bite a smaller rat nearby. And when it does, its glucocorticoid levels, its stress hormones actually go down. Aggression becomes an escape valve for the pressure.
That makes so much sense. Okay, let's zoom out again, part 3. We're now looking at the long arc years. Childhood, adolescence, the culture you grew up in.
The brain of a child is just pure plasticity. It's being shaped by every single experience, and our sources are very clear on this. Early life, adversity, neglect, trauma, it raises the odds of all sorts of adult problems, especially an impaired frontal cortex. That brake system just never gets built properly.
Which leads us right into that famously chaotic period. Adolescence.
Adolescence is this incredible biological paradox. The frontal cortex, the brake, is the very last part of the brain to fully mature. It's still under construction. Meanwhile, the emotional systems, the hormonal systems, the novelty-seeking systems, they are all going full blast. The accelerator is to the floor and the brakes are mushy.
Which explains so much about teenage behavior. And it gives us that great line, the greatest crime-fighting tool is the 30th birthday.
Exactly. The brakes finally come online. Now let's put that developing brain into a cultural context. Our brains are built to create us versus them groups, and it happens with terrifying speed. Just a 50 millisecond flash of an outgroup face, too fast to even consciously see, can light up the amygdala.
And that biological tendency can be tweaked by everything else, even hormones.
Absolutely. One study, for instance, showed that ovulating women displayed more negative implicit attitudes toward outgroup men. A hormonal shift that we are totally unaware of is shaping that instantaneous east-them judgment.
Culture then grabs that hardware and writes its own software on top of it, like in so-called cultures of honor.
Right. These are cultures where responding to an insult, defending your reputation, is incredibly important. The classic American example is the South. The violence there is less about, say, robbery and more about disputes over honor between people who know each other.
And the physiology actually backs this up, which is just fascinating.
It's amazing. Researchers insulted northern and southern men in a lab setting. A Confederate bumped into them and muttered an insult. The northerners, they pretty much just shrugged it off. But the southerners showed these huge spikes in both testosterone and glucocorticoids, anger, and stress. Their culture had literally programmed their endocrine system to respond to that insult as a major threat.
Wow. Biology and culture are just completely inseparable. Okay, let's try to pull all this together by looking at how a simple change in context can flip our moral thinking.
The classic runaway trolley problem is perfect for this. In scenario 1, you can pull a lever to divert a trolley. It'll kill one person but save 5. It's a detached utilitarian problem. It activates the cold, calculating part of the prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC, and most people, 70 to 90%, say yes, pull the lever.
It's just a math problem at that point. But then you change the context slightly.
Yes, slightly. In scenario 2, you have to physically push a large man off a bridge with your own hands to stop the trolley. Same numbers, kill 1 to save 5. But now it's up close and personal. It activates the amygdala and the emotional part of the PFC, the VMPFC, your gut check. And suddenly 70 to 90% of people say no, they can't do it.
Same outcome. But the psychological distance changes everything. It's a completely different brain circuit making the call.
And a key reason for that is the brain's strange inability to separate the literal from the metaphorical. We see this with pain. If you're excluded in a virtual game of catch online, the social pain you feel lights up the exact same brain region, the anterior cingulate cortex, as actual physical pain. To your brain, getting a cold shoulder is like stubbing your toe.
And that confusion is the propagandist's best friend.
Absolutely. When propaganda calls an outgroup vermin or filth, it's not just a metaphor. It's designed to trigger the insula and the amygdala, the parts of the brain associated with literal disgust and fear. It makes hatred a gut-level, visceral reaction.
But if our brains are that malleable, if those U-stem lines can be drawn so easily for the worst, it must mean they can be redrawn for the better.
They can. And that's the hope. We can change which category matters most in any given moment. The best historical example is the live and let live system from World War I.
These were the unofficial truces that just sprang up in the trenches.
Spontaneously, with no orders from above, no shared holiday. Soldiers on both sides started to cooperate. They'd deliberately miss their shots. They'd avoid shelling the latrines or mess halls. Why? Because they subordinated the big us versus them of nation states to the much more immediate, important category of all of us poor guys stuck in this trench trying not to die.
The immediate context of shared survival overwrote years of cultural programming.
It's a breathtaking example of our brain's flexibility. The categories are not fixed. We decide which ones matter.
So after this entire journey, from a split second to millennia, what's the big takeaway for all of us just trying to figure out our own behavior day to day?
Well, the easy answer is it's complicated, but I think the more profound answer is this. Yes, our worst behaviors, our biases, our aggression are a product of our biology, but so are our best behaviors, our empathy, our compassion, our cooperation. The same biology produces both. We have evolved more than anything to be incredibly malleable.
And that malleability leads to one last, really provocative idea about free will. Some research suggests our brain's motor cortex starts preparing an action before we're even consciously aware we've decided to act.
Which really throws a wrench in the classic idea of free will, doesn't it? If the brain acts before you do. But there's a different way to look at it. Maybe we don't have free will to initiate the right action, but we might have what some call free won't.
The power to veto.
The conscious veto, the capacity to stop the action that your subconscious has already set in motion. Maybe the most human thing we do, the thing our giant frontal cortex is really for, isn't starting the right behavior. It's exercising that free won't to stop the wrong one. Our capacity for restraint might just be everything.